Welcome, everyone. Good to see a large number of people here. My name is Steve McPhail, and I'm the Director of OET Online. And firstly, I want to begin by saying I've been teaching OET now for more than 15 years, and I find it a fascinating area of English to teach. You know, it's English for medical professionals. And I think the OET is a great exam because it really helps overseas health professionals prepare for the language exam. You learn real world skills while preparing for this exam that you can use in the workplace. So that's very unique for a language exam. And I think the area of English for medical purposes, it's a rich and diverse area. There's a lot of things to learn. It's a very specialized area. And yeah, really enjoy helping overseas health professionals develop those clinical communication skills. Now, Joe just mentioned a few of those clinical communication skills associated with speaking. And I'm going to talk today about some of those skills associated with writing. So let's look at the medical referral letter, everyone. So what is a medical referral letter? Well, the purpose of a medical referral letter is to include significant aspects of a patient's medical history. You need to provide a record of investigations done. Now, remember, in health, there are many, many investigations that can be done because there are many, many different medical conditions. So the language is diverse. So there's a lot of linguistic aspects that you need to get your head around when you're summarizing those investigations. The same with treatment provided. There are many modalities of treatment, and actually transforming that information from case notes into a professional medical referral letter can be challenging. The medical referral letter is a summary of that patient's progression over time. Perhaps that patient's condition has deteriorated, perhaps that patient's condition has improved. So you need to be able to summarize that in that referral letter. And finally, a medical referral letter informs the next health professional of the patient's ongoing care needs, if it's a discharge. And if it's a referral, it can inform them of the investigations required. So clearly, when we look at that, it's a very important document in the medical world and a great skill to have for your day one in the workplace. Let's break it down a little bit further. So with medical writing, there's a lot of standard conventions that you need to be aware of so that you can demonstrate your professionalism and expertise in your area. So we'll look at a few of these now. Firstly, a medical referral letter, it's a formal and professional document. It's a scientific document that has its own genre. And when you're writing your letter, you need to be careful of how you select information. You need to avoid TMI, too much information. That can be distracting to the main situation or requirements of that patient or the main information that you need to convey. So you have to be very selective when looking at the case notes. You need to consider your audience. The content that you're going to include in your referral letter will vary significantly depending on who you're writing to. If you're writing to a physiotherapist, you may have to focus on the mobility concerns of the patient. If you're writing to a dietitian, you may have to focus on the dietary aspects. If you're writing to a GP who already knows the patient, you may have to remember to focus on not information that the GP already knows, but what the GP doesn't know, quite often the recent information. So there's a lot to take in when you're thinking about who you're writing to. It's very important. Lastly, here you need to be clear and concise. Health professionals really value referral letters that are to the point, that provide an overview of the patient situation, but in a clear and concise manner that is easy to understand. So this then, we can look at this further by looking at the writing assessment criteria. Now, I really like the OET writing assessment criteria because it really does reflect what is required in a medical referral letter. So if you pay attention to this criteria when you're writing, and if you make sure that you follow these guidelines, not only are you preparing for your language exam, but you're also developing a skill and a style of writing that is used in the real workplace. So let's have a look at a few of the criterions here. First, we have purpose. Now, the purpose needs to be immediately apparent and expanded on in the body. So the reason for writing must be clear. In terms of content, the OET writing test involves good reading skills. You need to understand those case notes and really think about the information there so that you can accurately convey it in your writing, in your letter. In terms of conciseness and clarity, two things there. You need to be able to select the right information, but also you need to be able to present it in a concise manner. And clarity is important as well. You don't want to use too much fancy structures or emphatic language. It's got to be really quite factual and clinical, as we will see more in a moment. That also relates to genre, that being clinical and factual, because it's scientific writing. It's not an essay where you need to persuade someone to your viewpoint, where you may use emphatic language. It's not like that at all. It's more clinical or objective, fact-based, so the next health professional can take over the care. And for that reason, you really do need a good command of vocabulary in your subject area, so you can express that clearly. In terms of organization and layout, the letter needs to have a clear structure, so information can be retrieved easily. And for language, the writer needs to demonstrate proficiency with vocabulary. And you can imagine that, and I'm sure if you're preparing for OET, you're well aware of it, but you need to know a lot of professional vocabulary for the patient's signs and symptoms. You need a lot of vocabulary for the different body parts and the anatomy. So it's a huge area, all the vocabulary associated with procedures, with treatments, and so forth. In terms of grammar, patients' conditions are often complex. Therefore, you need that ability to express that complexity in your language, which can be done through sentence structures, including simple, compound, and complex sentences. So a lot to cover in that area. So I'm going to focus on three aspects of that criteria, and I'm going to show you some techniques that will help you write with professionalism and expertise. The good news is a lot of these skills that we spoke about, with a bit of dedication, and these can be taught and learnt by you guys, by you overseas health professionals. I'm going to give you some examples here, everyone. So on the left-hand side, you can see we've got the case notes. I'll just read them out to you. We've got Mrs. Jones cannot tolerate foods, only drinks fruit juice, urine darker in colour, chills and rigors. All right, that's her, the information in the case notes. Now, an informal, perhaps non-professional way of writing that would be, Mrs. Jones told that she cannot tolerate foods and only drinks fruit juice. She said the colour of the urine is darker and felt chills and rigors. Now, there's a few grammatical errors there, but also the style of writing is not really appropriate and it's not very clear. So how can we make that clearer? Well, one technique is what's called nominalization. And nominalization is the process of taking verbs, perhaps adjectives, and turning them into nouns. So we've got cannot tolerate, so not tolerate becomes intolerance. Darker color, the term discoloration can be used to achieve the same meaning. Now, if we transform those words, into that more formal style, into nouns, if we nominalize them, let's see what happens. Mrs. Jones reported food intolerance in addition to urine discoloration and chills and rigors. Suddenly, your writing sounds professional. You're demonstrating your professionalism and expertise through the language that you use. And that's crucial. That's a skill that can be learned. Let me give you a second example. So we've got the case notes here. Mr. Henry, CO, complained of diarrhea on and off last week. A bit informally, Mr. Henry suffered from diarrhea on and off over last week. So a little grammar error there, hasn't expanded, missing a definite article, but also it's using the same language, and perhaps there's a better word we can use than on and off. So we can go for this word here, intermittent. It's a little bit more formal, a little bit more precise. So formally, it could be written as Mr. Henry complained of intermittent diarrhea over the last week. Again, a little bit shorter, a little bit more professional. Let's look at another example. So in this case, we've got Ashley, 3 years old, not as anxious as before, little attempt to interact with others, did not participate in activities. Okay, that's the history. How do we write that professionally? Well, the informal example, Ashley is less anxious than she used to be, but she does interact with others, but she does not interact with others nor participate in activities. So that nor, it's a little bit emphatic when really you're just trying to be clinical and factual. If we nominalize it, we'll take the adjective anxious, we'll turn it into a noun, anxiety. We'll take the verb interact and turn it into the noun interaction. We'll take the verb participate, we'll make a noun participation, and we'll take this word here little into an adjective limited. Let's see what effect that has. And we're going to add a bit of complexity with while for some contrast. While Ashley's anxiety has decreased, there was limited interaction or participation in activities. So that reads really easily. That information about their anxiety is really easily retrieved by the reader. It's very clear. And also the complexity is expressed with the conjunction here, while. While Ashley's anxiety has decreased, there was limited interaction, that's formal, or participation in activities. So it's really captured that meaning in a clear and concise manner. All right, my last example today, we've got Mr. Murphy, not able to comply with medication regime, the old non-compliant patient. I'm sure you've all experienced that patient. Monitoring required. Informally, please monitor Mr. Murphy's medication because he can't able to comply. Now, there's a few grammatical errors there, but also it comes across as an instruction. And you probably want to avoid giving instructions to other health professionals. It's a little bit too direct, can be perceived as being a bit impolite. So there are ways around that. Let's have a look. Not comply, we can nominalize the verb comply into non-compliance. So formally and professionally, due to a history of medication non-compliance, that's a type of non-compliance, it's medication non-compliance. Due to a history of medication non-compliance, monitoring is required. Much more formal, and you haven't done a direct quest. You've stated the facts to the next reader, and then the reader can decide, okay, this patient has non-compliance with medication, I'm going to need to monitor them. So it's not a direct request. So these 4 examples I've given you all, these are things that you can do to your writing to sound more professional. And the really good thing about that is once you learn how, you'd be surprised how quickly you can master these strategies and techniques and start applying it to your own writing. That's going to lead to a more professional style, and you will be demonstrating your expertise through your language. A great thing to have under your belt when you start work as a health professional. So I would say studying for OET, it's a win-win combination. You're preparing for an exam that you need to pass, but in the bigger picture, you're preparing for your first day at work in the workplace and a future career. You'll be armed with skills that you can use in the workplace. So good luck with your studies, everyone, and I wish you a good journey and a successful career. Thank you.